The chest pains were real, and as I fell to the floor I looked up at my only son, my child. He looked down at me, then at my purse. He took my wallet, stepped over my body and walked out the door. He didn't call 911. He just took the money and left me to die. What he didn't know was that my late husband, a detective, taught me that a crime scene always tells a story. And this one was about to get him a cell. Hello there, and thank you for joining me. If you believe that a mother's love shouldn't be a blank check for disrespect and that every person, no matter their age, has a right to be treated with dignity, then you are in the right place. It gives me so much strength to know you're here. Please let me know where you're watching from. Now let me tell you the story of how my son's greed became the key to his own jail cell. My name is Loretta Wallace. For 35 years I was a supervisor for MARTA, the transit authority here in Atlanta. My life was a map of bus routes and train schedules, a world of timetables and transfers, of making sure people got where they needed to go. I've seen every kind of person, heard every kind of excuse. You learn to read people, to see the truth behind their stories. It's a skill that has served me well, especially in the quiet years since I retired. My home, a small brick bungalow in Collier Heights, is my sanctuary. It's filled with memories of my late husband, Franklin, and the solid, dependable life we built together. Franklin was a detective with the APD for 30 years. He was a quiet, methodical man who saw the world as a collection of details, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Our marriage was a partnership of two sharp minds. He'd come home from a long shift, sit at our kitchen table while I made dinner, and he'd talk to me about his cases. Not the gruesome parts, but the process, the thinking. Everybody leaves something behind, Loretta, he used to say, stirring his coffee. A footprint, a fingerprint, a lie that doesn't quite fit. You just have to be patient and look for the thing that doesn't belong. He taught me how to think backwards from a crime, how to document everything, how to see the world through a detective's eyes. I miss his mind almost as much as I miss his heart. My heart. That's another story. It's not as strong as it used to be. A few years back the doctors diagnosed me with atrial fibrillation. It's mostly under control with medication, but they warned me about the symptoms of a serious event. Shortness of breath, a sharp pain in the chest, a sudden weakness. A blueprint for a crisis. My biggest heartache now, though, isn't my own health. It's my son Jamal. My only child. He's 48 years old, but in many ways he's still a boy, always chasing a get-rich-quick scheme that never pans out. He works in commission-based sales, selling something different every year. Timeshares, water purifiers, solar panels. He lives in a fancy apartment in Sandy Springs he can't afford, drives a car with payments he can't meet, and is drowning in a sea of debt. His charm, which was so winning when he was young, has curdled into a slick, desperate performance. His visits home have become thinly veiled shakedowns. He doesn't ask for money directly. He talks about a deal that's about to close, about a commission check that's late, about a temporary cash flow problem. I'd always give him a little something, $100 here, $200 there, telling myself it was just to help him get by. But Franklin's voice was always in the back of my head. Look for the thing that doesn't belong. And the thing that didn't belong was the fear in Jamal's eyes. It wasn't the worry of a man trying to make rent. It was the hunted look of an animal in a trap. I started paying closer attention using the skills Franklin taught me. I checked the call history on the landline after he visited. I saw calls to numbers I knew were bookies. I saw the way he'd flinch when his phone buzzed. I knew, with a mother's intuition and a detective's certainty, that he was gambling. And he was losing. Badly. The disappointment was a physical weight, a constant dull ache in my chest. This was not the man Franklin and I had raised. This was a stranger, a weak man consumed by a desperate greed. And a desperate man, as Franklin always said, is a dangerous man. I started to wonder what he would do when my small handouts were no longer enough. What would happen when his desperation finally outweighed his conscience? My neighbor Augustus Gus Thorne saw it too. Gus is 80 years old, a retired Army sergeant and a widower. He and Franklin were as close as brothers. They'd spend hours on their porches just talking and watching the world go by. Since Franklin passed, Gus has made it his quiet mission to look out for me. He's a man of few words but deep loyalty. One afternoon as we sat on my porch swing, I finally voiced my fear. Gus, I said, my voice low. I'm worried about Jamal. I'm worried about what he's capable of. Gus just nodded, his eyes fixed on the street. Franklin was worried too, he said quietly. He saw the weakness in the boy. Said he had a hole in his soul that he tried to fill with money. He turned to me, his gaze direct and serious. What are you thinking, Loretta? I took a deep breath. I'm thinking of Franklin, I said. I'm thinking about how he used to say that to catch a criminal, you have to set a trap. You have to give them the opportunity to show you who they really are. Gus didn't say anything. He just sat there, a silent, solid presence. He knew what I was asking. I was asking him to be my partner, my witness. I was about to set a trap for my own son. A trap designed to answer the most painful question a mother can ask. What is the true measure of my child's heart? The plan began to form in my mind with the cold, methodical clarity of one of Franklin's case files. It was a dangerous plan, one that would put my own health at risk, but it was the only way to know for sure. The only way to see the truth, stripped bare of all the lies and charm. Jamal had called, saying he'd be over on Saturday to help with some yard work, which was his code for needing money. That gave me 3 days to prepare. On Thursday morning, I took the bus to my bank downtown. I stood in line, feeling a strange sense of calm, as if I were an actress preparing for a role. When I got to the teller, I asked to withdraw $5,000 from my savings account. In cash. The teller, a young woman with brightly colored nails, raised her eyebrows. That's a large amount of cash, Mrs. Wallace. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said, my voice steady. I'm having some work done on my roof, and the contractor gives a substantial discount for cash. It was the first lie in a chain of them, and it came to my lips with an ease that frightened me a little. The teller disappeared into the back and returned with a thick, paper-banded stack of $100 bills. The weight of it in my hands felt illicit, dangerous. Felt like bait. When I got home, I went straight to the old desk in the spare bedroom where Franklin used to do his paperwork. I took out the stack of bills and a fresh legal pad. One by one, I laid each bill on the desk, and with a pen I meticulously wrote down the serial number. It was a slow, painstaking process that took over an hour. As I wrote, I could almost hear Franklin's voice, sitting beside me at the kitchen table. The details, Loretta. The details are everything. A good case is built on a foundation of details nobody else thought to look for. This list of numbers was my foundation. It was my evidence. When I was finished, I took the list to the copy machine in the study and made 2 copies. One for me and one for Gus. That evening I called Gus over. I sat him down at my kitchen table, the same table where Franklin had taught me so much, and I laid out the plan. I gave him his copy of the serial numbers. I told him about the nanny cam I had bought, a tiny camera disguised as a smoke detector, and asked him to help me install it in the living room, angled perfectly to cover the armchair where I would leave my purse. I explained his role as the witness, the timer, the one who would make the call. He listened without interruption, his face a mask of grim concentration. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. This is a heavy thing, Loretta, he said finally, his voice gravelly. To test your own son like this. I know, I whispered, the weight of it settling on me. But I have to. I have to know who he is. I have to know if there's anything left of the boy Franklin and I raised. Gus nodded slowly. Franklin always said, you can't be afraid of the truth no matter how ugly it is. All right, Loretta. I'm with you. On Saturday morning, I prepared the stage. I took the thick stack of cash and put it in my favorite wallet, a worn red leather clutch. I made sure the bills were visible, a tempting flash of green. I put the wallet in my purse and placed the purse on the armchair in the living room, the one right under the new smoke detector. Jamal arrived just before noon, all smiles and false cheer. Hey, Mama. You're looking good. He gave me a quick one-armed hug that felt hollow. He spent about 20 minutes pulling a few weeds in the front yard before coming inside, sweating theatrically and asking for a glass of water. This was the moment. As I got him his water, I walked over to the armchair and took out my wallet. Oh, I almost forgot, I said, my voice a carefully crafted mix of casualness and slight confusion. I need to put this somewhere safe. I opened the wallet and made a show of counting the thick stack of bills right there on the kitchen counter. Jamal's eyes locked onto the money. I saw a flicker of something in his expression, a raw, naked hunger that he quickly tried to conceal. Wow, Mama, what's all that for? Mr. Gus is having his crew do some work on my roof, I said, repeating the lie. His contractor, a man named Henderson, gives a big discount if you pay in cash. Saves him the trouble with taxes, I suppose. I laughed, a light, airy sound. I'm just holding it for Gus until the men get here on Monday. I put the money back in the wallet and the wallet back in the purse. I left the purse on the armchair. The bait was set. The trap was ready. All I had to do now was wait for the animal to step into it. The hour that followed was one of the longest of my life. We sat in the living room making stilted conversation. Jamal was trying to be charming, asking about my doctor's appointments, telling me a story about a big sale he was about to close. But his eyes kept darting over to the armchair, to the purse sitting there fat with cash. He was like a predator circling a kill, waiting for the right moment to strike. I could feel the tension coiling in the room, a palpable humming thing. My own heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that was part fear, part anticipation. I knew I couldn't wait for him to make a move. The plan required me to be in control, to dictate the timing. It was the most dangerous part of the whole thing. I had to simulate a genuine medical crisis, a real possibility given my atrial fibrillation. I had to make it believable enough to fool my own son, but I also had to be careful not to trigger a real event in the process. I had spoken to my cardiologist about the warning signs, the exact sensations. I had rehearsed them in my mind 100 times. A sharp, radiating pain in the chest. A sudden shortness of breath. A wave of dizziness, of weakness in the limbs. I waited until there was a lull in the conversation. I stood up as if to go to the kitchen. "Would you like some more iced tea, Jamal?" I asked, my voice perfectly normal. I took 2 steps towards the kitchen and then I began the performance of my life. I let out a sharp gasp, a sound that was half real, half acted. My hand flew to my chest, clutching the fabric of my dress. "Oh," I whispered, my voice breathy. I allowed my eyes to widen, to fill with a genuine fear that wasn't hard to summon. I took another faltering step, my knees buckling beneath me. The room seemed to tilt, the edges of my vision blurring slightly. This part was real. The rush of adrenaline, the dizzying sense of risk. "Mama." Jamal's voice was sharp with alarm. He stood up from the sofa. I didn't answer. I let out another small moan and allowed myself to fall. I didn't fall hard like a sack of potatoes. I collapsed the way the doctor had described it, a slow, crumpling descent as the strength leaves your limbs. I landed on the thick Persian rug, my body turned towards him, my head cushioned by the carpet. I kept my eyes open, just a slit, the world reduced to a blurry view of my son's legs and the ceiling of my own living room. Lying there, the scent of dust and old wool in my nostrils, a profound and terrifying stillness settled over me. This was the moment of truth. The crucible. For a split second, every ounce of my being, the mother in me, screamed in protest. "What are you doing? This is your child. Your only son." I wanted to jump up, to tell him it was all a game, to pull him close and tell him everything would be all right. But the other part of me, the part that Franklin had trained, the part that needed to know the truth, held me fast. Kept my limbs limp, my breathing shallow. It forced me to watch, to observe, to be the silent witness to my own son's character. The seconds stretched into an eternity. The only sound in the room was the frantic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, each tick a hammer blow against the silence. I could feel my own real heartbeat, a frantic, irregular flutter in my chest, and I prayed that the performance wouldn't trigger the real thing. I had put my life on the line, all for an answer to a question I was terrified to have answered. I lay on the floor of my living room, a willing victim in a crime of my own design, and I waited for my son to make his choice. From my vantage point on the floor, the world was a strange, distorted place. I could see the scuffed legs of the coffee table, the underside of the sofa, and my son's feet, frozen in place a few yards from where I lay. He stood there for what felt like a lifetime, the grandfather clock in the hall ticking off the seconds of his indecision. 1 second. 2. 3. The mother in me held her breath, praying. "Call 911, Jamal. Just pick up the phone. Be the man I raised you to be." "Mama?" he whispered, his voice a strained, uncertain thing. "Mama, can you hear me?" I remained limp, my breathing shallow, my eyes slitted just enough to see. He took a hesitant step closer, then another. He knelt beside me, not to check my pulse, not to administer aid, but to get a better look at my face. I could feel his breath on my cheek. It smelled of fear. But what was he afraid of? Losing his mother or losing an opportunity? He whispered my name again, "Mama?" And when I didn't respond, I saw the shift. It was a subtle, terrible transformation. The flicker of concern in his eyes was extinguished, replaced by a cold, calculating light. The hunted animal was gone. The predator had taken its place. He stood up abruptly. His movements were now sharp, efficient. He glanced nervously towards the front window, then towards the kitchen. He was checking for witnesses just as a common thief would. My heart, my real heart, clenched in a spasm of pure, unadulterated pain. This was it. This was the answer. He didn't hesitate for another second. He walked directly to the armchair, his back to me. I heard the sound of the purse clasp opening, a small metallic click that echoed in the silent room like a gunshot. I heard the rustle of him fishing around inside, and then the soft, leathery sound of him pulling out my wallet. He didn't even look inside it. He knew what was there. He shoved the entire wallet into the pocket of his jeans. Then he turned back to me. He stood over my body, a dark silhouette against the bright afternoon light from the window. He looked down at me, his mother lying helpless on the floor, and there was no pity in his expression. There was no remorse. There was only a cold, hard finality. He had made his choice. He took a final quick look around the room, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. His gaze swept right over the new smoke detector on the ceiling without a flicker of recognition. Then he turned and walked out of the room. I heard his footsteps in the hallway, quick and purposeful. I heard the front door open, and then I heard it close with a soft, definitive click. And then silence. A silence more profound, more complete than any I had ever known. He was gone. He had taken the money and left me to die. Lying on that floor, in that deafening silence, the full weight of what had just happened crashed down on me. It was a grief beyond tears, a wound deeper than any physical ailment. The son I had raised, the boy I had sung to sleep, the child whose scraped knees I had bandaged was gone. In his place was a monster, a stranger who would trade his own mother's life for a stack of cash. Franklin's voice echoed in my mind, not with the warmth of memory, but with the cold, hard clarity of a final diagnosis. People always leave something behind, Loretta. Always. My son had left behind the shattered pieces of my heart. But he had also left behind a crime scene. And now, the detective in me, the part of me that Franklin had so carefully nurtured, had to take over. The mother had to recede, and the witness had to prepare her testimony. The click of the front door was the starting gun. My plan, my terrible, necessary plan, moved into its next phase. Every second was now critical. Lying on the floor, I fought the urge to get up, to weep, to smash something. Instead, I focused on Franklin's training. Document everything, Loretta. Be your own best witness. I mentally noted the time on the grandfather clock. 12:52 p.m. Jamal had been in the house for exactly 1 hour and 7 minutes. He had left my side less than 2 minutes after my collapse. The first unseen witness was electronic, its single unblinking eye capturing the entire monstrous act. The nanny cam, disguised as a smoke detector, was a brilliant little piece of technology I'd ordered online. Gus had helped me install it the week before, standing on a stepladder while I directed him. Angle it more towards the armchair, Gus. I want to see the purse clearly. Now its memory card held the irrefutable truth. Jamal kneeling, not in concern but in calculation. Jamal glancing around like a thief. Jamal taking the wallet. Jamal walking out the door, leaving his mother on the floor. It was a silent movie of a soul's damnation. The second and most important witness was human. On his front porch, just across the neatly manicured lawn, sat Augustus Gus Thorne. As prearranged, he had been there since Jamal arrived, hidden behind his newspaper, a silent sentinel. I knew he would have his old, reliable Timex watch, the one the army had issued him, ready. His job was simple but crucial: to document the exact time Jamal left the house. He would have seen the front door close at 12:52 p.m. He would have written it down on the notepad I had given him. Now came the most dangerous part of the wait. My instructions to Gus had been precise, born of Franklin's stories about establishing timelines and alibis. Gus, I had told him, no matter what, you wait exactly 15 minutes after Jamal leaves before you do anything. Not a minute more, not a minute less. 15 minutes. It was long enough for Jamal to get far away, to feel safe, to perhaps even start spending the money. It was also, I prayed, not so long as to put my own life in real jeopardy from my actual heart condition. Those 15 minutes, lying on my living room floor, were the longest of my existence. The silence was a living thing pressing down on me. What if my performance had triggered a real cardiac event? What if Gus got distracted? What if I had miscalculated everything? The line between the actress and the patient felt terrifyingly thin. I focused on my breathing, keeping it slow and steady, fighting the panic that threatened to overwhelm me. I ran through Franklin's lessons in my head, turning them into a mantra. The evidence will tell the story. The details are everything. Stay calm. See it through. At exactly 1:07 p.m. I knew Gus would be making his move. I heard the faint creak of his screen door, then the sound of his firm, steady footsteps on the sidewalk coming towards my house. As instructed, I had left my front door unlocked. I heard it open. Loretta. Gus's voice was a low, controlled rumble, but I could hear the undercurrent of real concern. Loretta, you in here? He walked into the living room and stopped. Oh, Lord have mercy, he breathed. He was a good actor, my Gus. He rushed to my side just as we had rehearsed. He knelt, checking my pulse. Loretta, can you hear me? He didn't wait for an answer. He pulled out his cell phone and I heard him dial the 3 most important numbers in my plan. 911. Yes, I need an ambulance at 1421 Collier Drive, he said, his voice urgent and clear. My neighbor Loretta Wallace has collapsed. She's unconscious, but she's breathing. Her name is Loretta Wallace, she's 76, she has a history of heart problems. Please hurry. He had done it perfectly. He established the time of discovery, my condition, my medical history. He was the concerned neighbor, the hero of the hour. The paramedics arrived with astonishing speed, their movements efficient and professional. They surrounded me, their voices a calm, reassuring babble of medical terms. They checked my vitals, strapped an oxygen mask to my face, and expertly loaded me onto a gurney. As they wheeled me out of my house that now felt like a crime scene, I caught Gus's eye. He gave me a single, almost imperceptible nod. The trap had been sprung. The evidence was secure. The story was now in the hands of the authorities, and I had written the first chapter myself. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, beeping machines, and calm, professional voices. They took me to the emergency room where a team of doctors and nurses worked on me with practiced efficiency. They hooked me up to an EKG, started in 4 and drew blood. I was, in fact, experiencing atrial fibrillation, the stress of the ordeal having triggered a genuine episode. But it was minor and they quickly got it under control with medication. As I lay in the hospital bed, the crisp white sheets cool against my skin, a profound sense of weary relief washed over me. The most dangerous part of the plan was over. I had survived. By the evening I was stabilized and moved to a quiet room in the cardiac wing. That's when 2 police officers arrived. They were from the Atlanta Police Department, Franklin's old stomping grounds. One was a young, earnest-looking white officer, the other an older, weary-looking black detective who reminded me so much of my late husband it made my heart ache. Mrs. Wallace, the older detective whose name was Miller, began, his voice gentle. We're here to take your statement. Your neighbor, Mr. Thorne, told us what happened. We're very sorry for what you've been through. This was my second performance of the day and it was just as important as the first. I had to be the perfect victim, confused, heartbroken, and frightened, but with just enough clarity to point them in the right direction. I summoned a few real tears, which wasn't difficult. I don't understand what happened, I whispered, my voice trembling slightly. I was talking with my son Jamal and then I felt a pain in my chest. The next thing I knew, the paramedics were here. Your son was there when you collapsed? Detective Miller asked, his eyes sharp. Yes, I said, letting my voice break. He was right there. He must have been so scared. He must have panicked and run for help. It was a lie that tasted like poison, but it was a necessary one. I couldn't be the one to accuse my own son. The evidence had to do that for me. We see, Miller said, exchanging a look with his partner. Mrs. Wallace, Mr. Thorne also mentioned that your front door was unlocked. We think it's possible that while you were unconscious, someone may have entered your home. Is there anything missing? Anything of value? This was my cue. My purse, I said, my eyes widening as if the thought had just occurred to me. It was on the armchair. My wallet was inside. I described the red leather wallet and then I delivered the crucial piece of information. There was money in it. A lot of money. $5,000. The young officer whistled softly. Why were you carrying so much cash, ma'am? I repeated the lie I had told Jamal, the lie that was now the cornerstone of my entire case. My neighbor, Mr. Gus, he's having his roof repaired. The contractor, a Mr. Henderson, gives a discount for cash. I was just holding the money for Gus, keeping it safe for him until Monday. Oh dear God, it's gone. Gus's money is gone. I buried my face in my hands, my shoulders shaking with manufactured sobs. I was not just a victim of a medical emergency. I was now the victim of a robbery, and my dear elderly friend was the collateral damage. Detective Miller was patient. He waited for my sobs to subside. "Mrs. Wallace," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Do you have any idea who might have done this? Did anyone know you had that cash in the house?" I looked up at him, my eyes wide with a carefully crafted innocence. Only my Jamal," I whispered. "But he would never, he's a good boy." Then I paused as if a painful thought had just struck me. "But, he's been having such a hard time lately. He's fallen in with a bad crowd. He owes money, I think, to some dangerous men. Gamblers." This was the masterstroke, the move Franklin would have been proud of. I wasn't accusing my son of theft. I was painting a picture of him as a potential victim himself. A good boy in over his head, possibly being coerced by dangerous criminals. I was giving them a motive, a direction, a thread to pull on. "Do you know who these men are?" Miller asked, his voice now tight with professional interest. I heard him on the phone once. I lied, my voice barely a whisper. "He mentioned a name. A man named Silas, or Slim. I think he runs some kind of game." I gave them the name of a notorious local loan shark and illegal gambling operator. A name I knew because Franklin had put him away once years ago. I knew he was back on the streets, and I knew from my own quiet investigation that Jamal had been seen in his orbit. The final piece of evidence was the list. "My husband," I said, my voice thick with real grief now. "He was a detective. He was always so careful. He made me write down the serial numbers of any large bills. He said it was good practice." I reached into the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out the folded piece of paper I had placed there. "I made a copy. Is this helpful?" Detective Miller took the paper from my trembling hand and unfolded it. He read the long list of numbers, and I saw a flicker of profound respect in his eyes. He looked at his partner, then back at me. "Mrs. Wallace," he said, his voice now all business. "This is very helpful. You've done excellent work. We'll look into it." They had the motive. They had the direction. And now they had the proof. The trap was no longer mine alone. It belonged to the Atlanta Police Department. The gears of justice, once properly lubricated with good evidence, can move with surprising speed. My tip, delivered with the tearful reluctance of a worried mother, was exactly the lead Detective Miller's unit needed. The loan shark I had named, a man known on the street as Slim Jimmy, was already on their radar. My story about Jamal's debt gave them the probable cause they needed to escalate their surveillance. And my list of serial numbers was the smoking gun they were waiting for. 2 nights after I was released from the hospital, they got their break. An informant told them Slim Jimmy was running a high-stakes, illegal poker game in the back room of a nondescript warehouse in the industrial district. Armed with a warrant, a SWAT team descended on the location. The scene inside, as it was described to me later, was one of smoky, desperate chaos. When the police burst through the door, men were scrambling to hide cash and cards. And right in the middle of it all, at the main table, was my son Jamal. He wasn't there to pay off his debts. He was there on a reckless gambling spree, a huge triumphant grin on his face, a mountain of chips in front of him, and a thick wad of $100 bills in his hand. He was trying to buy his way into the big leagues, to finally be the high roller he had always dreamed of being. When the officers put him in cuffs, he was indignant, shouting about his rights. But his protests died in his throat when they started examining the cash he had been throwing around so freely. One by one, the serial numbers on his bills were read into a radio and checked against the list I had provided. Met. The money in his pocket was the same money that had been in my wallet. The same money he had stolen while I lay helpless on the floor. He was arrested and charged with a laundry list of offenses: felony theft by taking, aggravated elder abuse, and a host of gambling-related charges. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The nanny cam video showed the crime in stark, undeniable detail. The testimony of my neighbor, Gus, established the timeline. And the marked bills in his possession were the final nail in his coffin. The next morning I was sitting in my kitchen sipping a cup of tea, the quiet of my home feeling less like a silence and more like a peace I had earned back. The phone rang. It was a collect call from the Fulton County Jail. It was Jamal. I let the call go to voicemail, my heart a cold, steady stone in my chest. I had already changed the outgoing message. A moment later I listened to the message he left. His voice was a frantic, weeping, pathetic thing. Mama, pick up. They've arrested me. I'm in jail. They're saying I stole from you. It's a mistake, Mama. A terrible mistake. You have to help me. I need bail money. Please, Mama, please. I deleted the message without a flicker of emotion. He still didn't get it. He still thought of me as a resource, a well to be drawn from. He didn't call to apologize. He didn't call to ask if I was okay. He called for bail money. He called again an hour later, and this time I let him listen to my new greeting. My voice, calm and steady, filled the silence. Hello, you've reached Loretta Wallace. I'm not available to take your call right now. If this is anyone other than my son, please leave a message. If this is Jamal and you're calling about bail, I'm afraid I can't help you. All my cash was in my wallet. If you had called 911 instead of stealing it, maybe you'd have your money. You made your choice. Now live with it. I hung up the phone. I looked around my quiet, peaceful home. The pain of my son's betrayal was still there, a wound that would likely never fully heal. But for the first time in a long time it was overshadowed by something else. A profound sense of justice, a deep, abiding respect for the man who had taught me how to find the truth no matter how ugly. Franklin was right. People always leave something behind. My son had left behind a trail of evidence that led directly to a jail cell. And in doing so he had, in the most painful way imaginable, finally set me free.